Hello everyone, welcome to Christ Center Ironworks. So in this video I'm going to be taking you through the process of forging this simple little latch design here. So this simple latch is going to be fairly easy to make, but it will have some more complexities for you guys out there that are just getting started in this craft that will help hone your skills in the world of blacksmithing and maybe even inspire you to get into a little bit more lock work in your particular practice. So the back plate of this latch is going to follow and conform to this kind of design here, and we're going to make that from a piece of 1/4 inch thick by 2 inches wide by 12-inch long flat bar stock. Now for my friends across the pond, that is 300 mil long by 6 mil thick by 50 mil wide flat bar stock. For those of you who do that, and if I've gotten any of those metric measurements wrong, you can correct me down in the comment section down below. I greatly appreciate it. So on that piece of bar stock, you can see I've already laid it out somewhat. I have 2 lines that are 2 inches long or 50 mil long each on both sides, already marked out and in the center of the bar. This, we're going to take a hot chisel and we're going to split those and draw those out into these decorative elements here, like you see. You will also notice on this bar that I have a middle section of dots drawn on here and punched in, center punch marked in, all cold. This is all done with center punch and cold chisel work so far. That's all marked in cold. We're going to be parting it there later, and that's actually going to be kind of a crucial step. We're going to leave everything together and get our alignment first of our whole latching mechanism. We're going to leave it all together, get all of our alignment, all the pieces on there exactly where we want them when the doors are shut. And then we're going to cut and take that bar apart, dress things up a little bit, and everything should roll together and create a nice seam and have like a perfect latch scenario. So that's the hopeful goal. So that's the reason for all those layout marks on the main bar. The other bit of material we have here is we have some 1/4 inch thick by 3/4 inch wide bar stock, and if I'm not mistaken, that's 20 mil wide by 6 mil thick for those of you across the pond. And this is just whatever length is handiest for you to hold on to. This is roughly about 18 inches long, 20 inches long, this particular piece is. And so you just need something with a long handle. What we're going to do though is we're going to forge all the components for the locking components out of this one singular bit of material for the bar stock. And so, we just got 2 pieces of steel we have to contend with, and then we're going to pull all of these parts out of that to forge this simple latch. So it doesn't require a whole treasure trove of materials to start this process or to have a lot of fun doing it. So without further ado, we're going to start on the back plate first, and we'll get it hot and we'll start the splitting and forging process. Okay, for this first step, we're going to set this on the anvil here. We're going to go ahead and start our line that we've already laid out, dead center of the bar with a cold chisel and whatnot. We're going to start hot chiseling that right up to our center punch mark that we have already made. That was 2 inches long, if you will. This cut's going to be 2 inches long, or a total of 50 mil for those of you across the pond, or 50 millimeters if you want to be proper about it. We're going to go mostly through on one side without going too far with it. We're going to flip it over. We're going to put it on a cutoff plate. We're going to find the middle of the bar again, right where we started our split. We're going to find where our slit's at, and we're going to cut straight down through best we can. And what this is going to do is this is actually going to fracture off that little bit of rag that we created, that little bit of a burr. It's going to help start fracturing that off. It allows us to get a nice clean cut. Again, we're aiming for about 2 inches of a cut there. So I'm going to go ahead and get this hot one more time, and we'll just keep this splitting process. Once this is split, we'll repeat it on the other side. back over. If you find it's not cutting good enough from one side, you can always just flip it back over to the first side and give it a few more cuts from that direction. Again, cutting right into that soft cut-off plate material, which is just mild steel, allows us to go all the way through without damaging our chisel, which is highly important. Allows us to cut stuff off like rag or anything that we have from the cut. Set that on there. There's a little bit of rag there. Then I'm going to use the chisel to clean up. It's a highly quick way of doing that. When you've got rag, you can just tilt it to one side, tilt the chisel to one side while it cools, and just cut straight down through. And it'll kind of fracture and break that little rag off there. And it saves you a little bit of filing time when you cut those rags out of there with the chisel. All right, now we got that side done. We'll do the exact same thing to the other side and continue working it. All right, now that you've got both ends done, we're going to do a very easy conveniency bend to get one of these legs out of the way. And then we're going to forge a simple taper on the opposite leg of the one you just bent out of the way. Use all the surfaces and edges of your anvil if necessary to complete this process and to make it easier on yourself. So we got that started. I'm going to go ahead and get it hot. There's no need in taking and hitting cold metal. So we'll get this hot again. Okay, got that leg good and hot. Again, time to forge this up. All we're looking for is a nice taper here. And we're going to match it the same with all the rest of them as well. So we got the rough forging done. Now we're going to just spend time smoothing up that taper. This is down in the planishing heat. Again, use all surfaces of your anvil if you have to get the right reach and the right hold on this. Perfectly okay to do that. Before we go on to the next stage, or before we make everything else match this one, we want to make sure that we have a nice, smooth, clean forging. That way we have a good representation of what all the other ones need to take and be. So we're just going to wash, rinse, repeat that all the way around. All right, so for this one, I'm going to bend it out of the way a little bit, the one that we just finished. And I'm going to straighten this one up a bit so we can work on it. We'll get it hot again. Take another heat on her. be careful not to over forge this leg. All you're trying to do is make a carbon copy of the other one that you just did. So don't watch how many hammer blows you're putting into it. You don't want to make it longer than the other one. So now we're going to straighten out the very first one we did. We're going to straighten this down and see how they look, see if they're roughly the same. And they're pretty much there. There's some little differences. This one's a little thinner, long ways this way, but nothing we can't work with. So put that a little bit more of a tip on that one, and that ought to be fine. Something just like so. Looks good to me. Again, just like before, just doing a little planishing heat. Get the surfaces planished up. Looking nice before I start scrolling it. So you have two options here. You can flip this around. You can grab in the seat of the pants here on this side and go ahead and do these out the same if you would like. Or you can go ahead and finish this side because those scrolls now shouldn't impede anything that you're working on the other side, and just continue on. For brevity's sakes and for efficiency, we are going to just continue on the side that I've already got really nice and heated up. And we're just going to go and form that out into the scrolls and the finial, and then I'll do it exactly to the same but off camera, so this way you can see the completed piece. It's the same process, you know, basically 4 times. All right, I'm going to move this out about the same angle as this other side, and now I want to start curling it. I'm going to use the horn here to start curling that thing out. Try not to hit too much in one area, and definitely don't contact the horn or the anvil. You're hitting off the edge of the anvil here, off the edge of the horn, just to roll this piece out. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to hammer it back to myself a little bit. And we're just trying to get this thing to be curled out like so. We'll do that to the other side. And then I'm going to show you a little trick to get a little extra curl out of this and create a really nice look at the same time. All right, what was good for the goose is good for the gander. We're going to do that on this other side. Get this moved around till it looks like the side we just did. Roughly speaking. Our goal here is we just want to make them both look similar if we can, or similar enough. That's kind of the aim on this one. If you had any inconsistencies in the piece before you did this stage, say if like the one leg was just a tiny bit longer than the other, you're going to really see it here. So if you don't treasure a little inconsistency in your work and you want it to be perfect, again, you're going to have to take the extra time and gentle care to make sure both sides are perfect the way that you want before you go into this step. Because once it's curled up, it's kind of hard to make them look right, if not impossible to make them look right at that point in that juncture in time. So just keep that in mind. In my work and in most old ironwork, you'll see a little inconsistency is just fine. In fact, it adds to a little bit of the personal drama and flair to the ironwork itself. Or at least that's my thoughts of it anyhow. So, now I'm going to show you the next little step on this side to make this look a little more interesting. Because as of right now, we have something that's the same thickness as the parent material, and it all looks kind of just flat and plain. But we want it, when their light hits it in certain ways, to give it a facet. We want it to bounce that light. So we want to play a little bit with shadow, light and shadow. So we're going to create a little shadow line on this piece by creating a facet around the outside edge of this scroll. So I'll get it hot and I'll show you how that works. Okay, doke. So I'm going to show you how this works here. We're going to get her nice and hot. We're going to go to the far side edge of the anvil. And starting at the crotch of the pants here of this piece, we're going to hammer a bevel on the outside edge of this scroll. And we're going to work all the way towards the tip. And we're going to just keep doing that. Be real careful and tidy with our forgings when we get close to the seat of the breeches there. And we're just going to keep hammering that bevel. We'll come to the near side edge of the anvil. And we're just going to continue that bevel right on around. So we're kind of just sharpening that outside edge, if you will. So we're thinning it down. Now I'm into planishing heat, just cleaning this up. And what that's going to do for us, it's going to do a couple things really. It's going to give our ironwork a little bit of delicacy to it. And it's going to give us that shadow line of interest. See how it glints? When that gets brushed up, it's going to look quite a bit more fascinating than it just being a plain flat surface. Do you see the difference? See how it just gives it a little more something. It makes it more of a three-dimensional item and versus a 2D or a two-dimensional item there. So now I might go along here, and you can take your time planishing this and planishing out your hammer blows and making it perfectly smooth if you like. Or you can leave that little rippling of that hammer blow in there. Is just fine. Nothing says you have to take out all the hammer marks. This is a forged item after all. We are blacksmiths. We like things to show our work and our craftsmanship, and a bit of a hammered look is okay from time to time. So there we go. Just a little extra planish work, and that just looks really neat looking, in my opinion anyhow. So next, I'm going to just heat it up and do the same thing, and then I'll flip around and I'll come back with you guys once I have this whole thing basically completed and ready for the next step. Okie doke. So here we go. We've got both ends done now. This is what yours should look somewhat like if you're following along. It doesn't have to look exactly like the one I'm doing in this video. You can get as creative with these finial ends as you would like. So you might be real tempted to cut this into at this stage. Do not do that. That will create a lot of headache and a lot of alignment issues later on. Leave this whole for right now. That is going to greatly increase our accuracy with our layout work when we try to make our latch piece and all the staples and all the stuff to make this a latch that works. It will make all that layout work loads and loads and loads easier if these are still connected. After all the layout work's done and test fit-ups are done, before we rivet everything down, we will cut this in two and do any final little file up or touch up that we need to before we assemble everything permanently, and then you will have a latch that works perfectly and comes together and looks nice. So that's a pro tip for you. Do not cut this at this juncture. So for right now, we are done with the back plate pieces. Okay, they are still connected together. Now we need to take and make the latch piece. That'll be the next step in there. So we're going to call this part Part A, and then the latch is going to be Part B. So we're going to make Part B fit Part A. What I mean by that is we're going to decide some things about this latch, and we're going to use the information like the space we have to work with, the width that we have to work with. we're going to use that information to dictate how long our latching piece in our bar is going to be. So once we make our latch piece fit our backer pieces, then and only then do we then decide how we're going to make our staples and how we're going to end up making the catch that this thing ultimately snaps up over and goes onto to latch the door. So we make each part to fit the part prior to it, and this is a very simple process of breaking down much larger complicated pieces of ironwork. Also, this is a great time to point out that this qualifies as a very simple locking mechanism. Now, this doesn't have a key, and it doesn't have a spring tension, a spring retainer to hold it locked in place. So this is just a gravity fall latch instead of a lock. But if it did have a spring retention on it, this would be considered a lock. So this is a great little foray into the world of making locks. And you can very quickly see how easy it would be to create a key that would just go in, and basically you could poke the key in and it'd be a little flag key, and it would just lift the latch of the bar on the outside of the shop, right? So you could very easily take something like this and expand upon it and make it an actual working, functioning lock. But that's not the subject of this video. The subject of this video is making a simple latch. But it's pretty cool how you can do that with just a few little tweaks and add a few extra pieces, and you can come out with something pretty mechanical. So the next step, we're going to go ahead and forge the flag on the end of this. This will be the pointed part. Some people call it a rooster tail. Other people call it a flag end, a ramp, whatever you want to call it. But it's the part that will bump up and over our catch, and it'll stop the piece from going back and forth. So we're going to forge that next, and then we will decide how long to make this and cut it off and do the final bits there. So to start this latch, you want your bar reasonably hot. We're going to go to the far side edge of the anvil, and we're going to set off roughly a cube of material. So this is 3/4 inch wide, and so we're going to want this to be sticking over 3/4 inch. We're going to back draw some of this material away from there for the latch. Just drawing down to where we kind of have a nub sticking out here on the end. Do we see that there? Good. So get this hot again. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and refine this nub now a little bit. We're using half on, half off blows, by the way, to set this down. And then we're working back to make the shank of our latch here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn that up. And out here on the outer corner, that's what we're going to forge down into our taper. Go out to the outside edge of the anvil. And we're going to taper that right on down. I'm matching the angle with my hammer. And then I'm correcting the material thickness so it stays the original parent bar stock thickness. Then dress this up a bit more. And all I'm doing there is planishing it up. So let me explain why we first created a cube of material and then formed that down into our point. If you do it the other way around and you put a point on your end of your bar and then you come down to set that down, what you end up with is this area. Grab Mr. Thing here. What you end up with is this area right in here ceases to be square up and down. So it doesn't make a very good catch. What it does instead that you end up having to fight in your work is it creates a slope. So there'll be a slight slope to this when you set it down. There's a whole host of reasons for that. I won't get into the physics of it, but again, if you reduce neck down this area first, then forge out the flag, you've isolated a very specific amount of material between here and here. And as we're hammering on this to not only draw this down, but we're also kind of upsetting it in this direction. So some of that material is moving back to the corner to make and leave a very crisp outside corner here. And that's what we want. Now this, I've got just a little more work to do there to take and tidy it up a little bit, and a little bit of work to do on the front to tidy it up to make it look the way I want it. But that is essentially how you do this to get a really nice, clean inside shoulder. We isolate the mass first. So we start here by isolating the mass at the edge of the anvil with half on, half off blows. Once that mass is isolated well enough, we flip it upside down and we draw that outside corner in and down that direction. And that's what will leave us with a really nice sharp catch that'll grab that peg every time. So that's what you want. So I will refine this just a bit more. And now we just have to draw out the shank down to where our actual hinge piece will go. And we will do that by comparing this against the back of our latch plate. Okay, so now that we've got this back plate bracket piece done, and we have that latch, that first portion of that latch forged out. Now this is all cold. Ideally you'd still do this while this was nice and warm and hot. You would just figure out where this needs to be by eyeballing it and then do that. But I let this cool down and just so I could better illustrate what I'm going for here. But you see I've got a little grease pencil mark here, and all I've done is I've just made a decision about how much material I might need looking at the volume I have left for this catch. For this little latch portion here. I've kind of just done a quick little estimate to think, okay, I have enough extra material, enough mass there that I can draw that out and get this roughly where I want it to end up, and which was to be riveted on about right here, about at the crotch of the pants here on the back of this bracket. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat this up, and I'm going to forge to within about 3/4. This bar is 3/4 of an inch wide. And so I'm going to leave a cube of material or a square of material that's 3/4 by 3/4 or 20 mil by 20 mil for those of you across the pond. So that's going to be the aim. So I'm going to forge this all the way down until I reach that point, at which point we will cut this off, flip it around, and round that up. So I'll get this in the fire and we'll get going. All right, making sure the tip of our catch is over, our latch is over the edge of the anvil so it doesn't get damaged by the anvil. We're going to forge this piece down, all the way down, necking this down until we reach that point. That's leaving roughly 3/4 of an inch of material right out at the very end of our latch. We're just going to keep stretching this stock right on out. Heat, beat, repeat. So we're going to keep working on this until we've left that cube of material. All right, there we go. Now we left ourselves about 3/4 of an inch square or cube of material behind that point, and we're ready to chop this off. So we're going to do that in the next heat. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cut this bar off. Set it up here on the anvil. Again, leaving ourselves a little nug of material right there on the end, roughly 3/4 of an inch. And we'll cut most of the way through this, but without going to the anvil completely. Then I'm going to use a pair of tongs, and we're going to break that off. Just like so. Bada bing, bada boom. Now don't throw this away. We're going to use this not only for the staple that we're going to use for our latch, but we're also going to use this for the catch, the part that this thing snags on for the latch as well. So we'll save this bar of material and just put it off the side of the fire. Now we flip this around, grip it in a pair of tongs, find whatever will grip this nicely. Whether you go all the way over the piece, whether you go all the way over this latch jaw piece or not, that's up to you. Just find a pair of tongs that'll grip this securely, because in this next step, we're going to be going to the far side edge of the anvil. We're going to be forging a shoulder right behind here, and then we're going to square this up, octagon, and round it up. And then that's going to turn it into a nice little round flat spot for our rivet to take and go through. So I'm going to get this hot again, and as soon as it is, I'll be right back with you. All right, now to the far side edge of the anvil. We're going to come up and use edge blows. So that means our hammer's not completely over the edge of the anvil. Create a little shoulder there. So hopefully you guys can see a nice square corner, how that could be helpful. Just like so. And now I want to start driving off the corners on this piece. Near side edge of the anvil. Give that a little round up. Now I will take one more heat to clean that up and make it almost perfectly round the way I would like it. All right, folks, got this nice and round. Looks good. I'll probably take one more light pass at a planishing heat to take this the rest of the way. There's a slight bevel here where I cut it off with the chisel. We might leave that. I might rasp it perfectly round, or I might take a little more time and just gently hammer that with a really lightweight hammer locked in the vise to round up that in. But at any rate, the latch portion is done for this piece. So I'll show you how all this looks together now. Again, this is our back plate. And I will take and put the latch portion and lay that right along with it. There you go. You can see how that's all coming together. It's roughly right about where I want it to be. Now, some of you may be asking, well, why such a long latch for? Well, I'm securing barn doors with this, a pair of rolling barn doors, and there's quite a significant gap between one half to the other. So I need to span that gap and still be able to get a purchase on the other side. And so that's why this is so long. It might look a little kind of askew right now, but I'm forging this to fit my particular application. You have to forge yours to fit your application. So now the next steps is to take some of that scrap bar that we had, and we're going to forge the staple out, and then we're going to forge the catch. Okay, now we're going to start on our staple bit. We're going to stick, this bar is 3/4 inch wide. We are going to stick at least 3/4 of an inch off the end of the anvil, or what I like to call a cube of material, or a square of material if you'd rather. We're going to stick roughly that much off the edge of the anvil, and we're going to hammer it right around the sharp corner here, and we're going to address any puckering or bending that's occurred. Just like so. So this is going to form, this is the basis of our staple that we're going to be making. This part here is what the actual latch will ride in. This is not the portion that's the catch. So this is the part that it's going to ride in, and we'll show you that here in a moment. Now, depending on how finicky you want to be, you can forge an absolute square corner if you'd like, outside square corner, or you can leave it slightly rounded, whatever your preference is. If you do a really sharp outside corner, I think those look really nice and sweet, so we'll probably do that. But basically, you're going to go through the same steps, as always, of upsetting an outside square corner, doing an upset square corner on this piece. But the important point is to forge down about 3/4 of an inch. Now, the reason why I'm leaving this so thick is this is going to take a lot of abuse when the barn doors rack back and forth this way. So I'm leaving it 1/4 inch thickness because I don't want any sort of bending or weirdness going on there. This is a smaller latch, so it's not a huge latch by no means, but it is, it has to take some strain. So we're going to leave this part pretty well thick. Now the actual catch portion we're going to do in a very similar manner, and you'll see that here in a little bit, but with an added detail of giving it kind of like a little decorative finial, just so that way it doesn't look like just a square bar sticking up straight up in the air. So I'll get this hot again. We're going to focus most of our heat right here into the bottom of this corner, so this way we can lightly upset that outside corner to get it nice and square, and then finish the bend where it's a true square bend here at the anvil, to where it's an exact 90 degrees. Then we can move it over, and I've determined that about 1.5 inches outside to outside dimensions is what I want for this particular latch. I did that by just laying stuff out and looking how it fit, and played with played with it a little bit just to see kind of how I wanted that to rise and fall, and that'll all make more sense here in a minute when we get back into the part where we actually put all this together and we start doing the assembly work. So, using a really lightweight hammer, we're going to form this outside edge to be nice and square by aiming all of our blows almost in a glancing-like fashion to that outside corner. What we're trying to do is we're just trying to move enough material here to make a nice square line across that outside edge. And then we're just going to stretch out the extra bit here in a little bit. We'll square this back down. So it's upsetting right now in a lot of different ways, and that's okay. But we're doing that just so this way we can get this outside corner to be really nice and sharp. But we're also growing in width. And we'll dress that with a bigger hammer, put it back to the original parent bar stock thickness, and then we will draw out the thickness of the leg there to correct for the thickening that happened. So I'm correcting for the thickness that we gained by putting it back to the original distance. Got that all trued up. As you can see, we've created a really nice sharp outside bend on that corner. And now all we got to do is bend this back nice and true and square to a nice square angle, just like so. So that half of our staple's done. Now we will go 1.5 inches on the outside of this bar here. Then we will do 3/4 of an inch beyond that, and we will bend that down, and then that will make our entire complete staple. Okay, before we do this next bend, I want to show you the setup on the layout here. So I've made 3 punch marks indicating that that's where I'm going to cut it off at. Now this line happens to be just a little bit longer than 3/4 of an inch. What I want to have is a 3/4 inch tab left over, a 3/4 square tab left over. So keeping in mind that I may cut this off with either with a hot cut chisel, I might saw this off later. It's always good to leave yourself a little extra material. Now, the reason why I came up with 7/8 of an inch is because of the thickness of the bar. If you leave yourself at least half the thickness of the bar on your cut line, so shift your items at least 1/8 of an inch. So this is 1/4 inch material. So if you move it 1/8 of an inch further wide, if you will, then it will end back up on your spot whenever you're done. So that's just some quick tips for that. If that didn't make sense to you, please, roll through that section of the video again. So I'm not going to bend at this 3-dot mark. I'm going to bend at this other line I drew on here for your visual convenience. And I also put a dot on each side with a center punch on the edges of this piece. Now this dot will eventually be worked out, but that is my visual reference once this line is gone in the fire to know where to put that on the edge of my anvil. So I will hang that just to the slight offside edge of the anvil, again about 1/8 of an inch or so. I'll put it off to the outside and I'll make my first bend. Now, as I sweeten this bend up, the outside corner, and then take it up the rest of the way where it's nice, true, and square, then I will have a piece then on this long bar that I can then cut off and do any final little tweaks and fit up work. I will mention, however, this is a real nice place to have yourself a block of steel that goes in the hardy hole of your anvil that is a radius block or something like that that fits the dimensions that you're going for. So as you can see, this radius block is particularly a little bit too wide, too square. So it can't fit this smaller dimension without that line being on top of it there. But ideally, the goal would be is that you can fit in between those two shoulders with that block. If you don't have the time to make that up, just get any random bar of steel will work and dress the edges to fit so you can help use that to square up your piece over. Barring that, Olga here is a German pattern anvil, or what they call a European pattern anvil. And it has a square tail section. It has a square horn on the back, and I use that for this type of work all the time. But for this video's sakes, and assuming that you don't have that, that is just some suggestions for you, is go ahead and get yourself a little chunk of steel that's roughly, inch and a half wide, and, that way you can work over that instead of the edges of your anvils when this doesn't fit. So, without further ado, let's get this hot and we'll get her bent. Okay, we got it nice and hot here. I'm going to find my marks. If you can't find your marks, sometimes a quick little rake with your hammer is a good way of doing so. I'm going to set that over the edge of the anvil, and I'm going to give it a bend, adjusting for that pooch up that it does, like we did on the other piece there. I'm going to check where my center punch mark is at. It's looking good. And now we're going to switch to a lighter hammer. We're going to start driving up that outside corner. This time, instead of having the anvil to support us, we have the stock here that acts as an anvil. So we're going to get this hot one more time. We're going to have to. in order to get that formed up. Hopefully you guys can see that center punch mark. If this center punch mark moves one way or the other, you'll take a little more from this side or a little more from that side in your bend as you upset your work. You'll drive more in this direction or drive more in this direction, but try to keep that center punch mark square or right dead center of that bend, if you will, for the most accurate results. Now, what this is going to leave is as I hammer on this like before, we're going to gain width in the material here, but we're going to gain width and we're going to lose length. So, which is fine. We are going to regain the length that we need in the next step, but we want to get this corner formed first. You can see there's a little bit of a pocket there. It's sharp on this corner, sharp on that corner, but there's a bit of a pocket dead center. And so we're going to keep working this at a very high heat, hopefully sticking it in our fire something like this. We're going to get a good heat in this corner, and we're going to just keep upsetting that material right here, just like so, until we get a nice sharp outside corner. Then, once all that's said and done, then we can start playing with the rest of it here and start driving things back and getting it all squared up to where it's up and down nice like. Okay, corner's good and hot again. We're going to just keep hammering that, getting that upset in there, getting it nice and squared up. Again, using a really lightweight hammer here to make this possible. Still working that outside edge if we can. Now we can stand that up. I'll take another heat on this. We're getting really close. I'm over the slack tub. I'm cooling the end I don't need to move off. Now I'll use a bigger hammer to drive that corner up a little smarter. Use the slider hammer to form that outside edge better. This lightweight hammer doesn't put as much throughput energy, kinetic energy into that corner, so it spends a lot of time moving the outside corner instead of bending the piece. Hence, that's why I'm using this little hammer for most of the work. That needs to be done there. And now we're at a place where we can start dressing that material thickness where we want it. Adjust for that spread. And now I've got about one more heat in this to correct for a little bit of a bump I've got there. You see it's got a bit of an arch there. We need to correct for that. And the only real way to do that is to hammer on this inside edge here if you don't have a bar that you can hammer across. And I need to correct for that bump. Our outside corner is nice and crisp. And so now we just got to get the inside corner to do the same in this staple to be square across. Then we will take a measurement and see if we hit our 1.5 inch across measurement. I'm hammering, I'm aiming for the closeness of that corner there to square this off. I'm going to tap back here. Go just a little past 90. And square back down. Again, this lightweight hammer is just kind of pushing things where we want it without moving things where we don't. Look for squareness in the piece. All over, we want it to be nice and square and true and plumb. this is probably the most challenging bit of forging you're going to do in this latch. So all of it can be a little bit daunting at first. My suggestion is you take each piece of this puzzle one step at a time. And that bar is getting murderously hot, so we're going to switch up to a pair of tongs now. But yeah, you want to take your time doing this. It's worth the time to take time to do this right. So there we have it. We're going to get her nice and brushed up. Now I'm going to choose, for accuracy's sakes, I'm going to choose a saw cut versus a chisel cut. If you want to chisel cut this, you got to have a thin, slick chisel to come in here and cut from this side. And you start the cut there. You might flip it over and go to the edge of the anvil and drive her off there. But my thing is just let it cool down naturally and saw it off. That way you get a nice accurate result. But more importantly, let's see if we hit our 1.5 inch measurement outside corner to corner. In this particular project, it's not overly critical because, well, it could be 1.5 inches or it could be under or over by a little bit, and that'll be all right. But I got my tape measure here. I'm looking for outside corner to corner. And we got just a touch over, actually. So we have 1 5/8 inches is what it is. And that's probably because I can see it's a little thin in this middle cross section. So we did thin it a little bit here. So we grew a little bit. So we grew a touch. If this is critical for you, you can cool this end. Once this is cut off, you can cool this end, and have this hot just in the middle, and just give it a few whacks like that to take that 1/8 of an inch overstep out of there. But in general, it's hit our 1.5 inches. The main critical thing is I needed 1.25 inches-ish on the inside. I didn't want to have a big wide gap in here, and you'll see why that's important when we actually go to the function of the latch. But there you go. There you have it. There's part of the staple. Now we will saw this off, and we'll set this aside, and now we'll form the other piece. Then we'll get into the finer details, and we might just do, I don't know how we'll do it in the video here, because there'll be a little bit of saw cutting work and filing work that has to be done, and I might speed up through those processes and give you a few quick tips just so you can see how to do that. But it's pretty self-explanatory once you get into it. So I'll cut this off, I'll set that off to the side, and we will build the other portion, or the catch, the actual catch of the lock now. Okie doke. Now we're going to forge this catch. So I'm going to set this on the anvil. Still using the same piece of bar stock. I've had to switch to some tongs now. I'm going to try to split this as evenly as I can, right down the middle, for roughly, doesn't have to be real long, just however long you want your detail to be. Now, you can choose a lot of different finials. I'm just choosing this particular finial because it's fun, and I think it'll complement the piece well. But that's roughly about 1 inch long slit down the middle there, and I'm going to do that to the other side as well, just like so. Go to the other side, try to get that to break loose. Pretty close there. Might have to go down just a little further with her here. Again, at the end of the day, this is just a gate latch, so it's not super critical. But you still want to do a tidy job of forging if you can. So we'll go right here. Go back to the front side. And hopefully split this piece completely through. Now you might be saying, well, Roy, this has gotten really cold. And you're right. This is about the best part. This is about the best time you can get to actually start getting things to fracture and split apart. If you do this while hot, it's just going to bend that web back and forth versus cutting down through. So it's good to go ahead and do it right now at this stage, where you can come in and basically shear out the rag from both sides. So you can work on that at a colder heat. And you can see there's some rag in there. But if I keep working this with the hammer, I'll get all of that rag out of there, and I will have less cleanup work. I won't have to spend a lot of time with a hot rasp or file to clean this up before I go on forging. So just forging at a little colder temperature. You know, this is definitely not something you'd want to forge on right now, but this is a perfect fracturing temperature for the steel to cut out all of that webbing and get all that rag out of there. Just like so. All right, next up, we'll heat this up and we'll do the rest of our little finial here. All right, so we're going to use the small little hammer that I used earlier. This is the perfect size hammer for doing this smaller detail work, more in-depth work here. Just because we don't need that big hammer to get the work done that we're looking to get done. A small hammer like this is actually much better suited to this task. As you can see, you can still work out quite a bit of material pretty fast as well. Hence, this is why I choose this hammer for this type of work when it's small. Allows me to get in places and have access to the piece I'm working on that the much larger hammer does not have. All right, drew out one little leg there. And I might keep going with that. I'm going to decide. Yeah, so I'm going to keep drawing that one out. And this other one I'll draw out here in a moment. All right, quick bend for the one thing right out of the way. Give it a conveniency bend. I'm going to straighten this other portion out just a little bit so it's a little easier to work on. Then I'm going to forge that out. We'll do something quite a bit different with this one. I'm just going to keep it nice and short and sweet. I don't want to take and make this a very long taper. I want it to be a very short taper for this particular one. There we go. Just like so. It's looking pretty good to me. I've got a little more work to do here. There's some dress up work I'm going to have to do on this piece to get her exactly where I want it to go. Bend it out and away. And we'll get it hot and keep forming this. As you can tell, I've got some little overhits from hammer marks. That's okay. We'll dress all that up in the final result. Keep working that out. Make a little backwards curl in here. Set that back in a little tighter. And now I'm going to forge this outside edge. It's going to give me a little bit of a bevel scroll to the inside, which is kind of a nice, neat little look I'm going for. By spreading the outside edge, so I'm keeping my hammer angle, I force that around tighter. And I also give a nice little hammer facet line, like we did in the main portion of the bracket. Again, makes it look very, very neat, and in my opinion, very, very appealing. So this is all just planishing heat at this point. I'm not doing any heavy lifting when it comes to forging. I'm just moving that around. Hopefully you can see how that looks. Looks pretty neat to me. All right. Now I will bring this back around, just do a little curly Q on top. Now for the final detail. I'm going to curl this over, and then I'm going to curl the tip out a little bit. Might take it over a bit more, punch it in there, and I might take that tip out just a fuzz more. Give it a little tap back that way. Just give it a little something extra. Now, if you find that this is not the look or style you're going for, let's say it's closed up a little bit like it's done with me, this is a great point to take and have a pair of scroll tongs so you can get in here and you can just give it a little opening, or you can give it a slight twist or unbend, and that'll take and straighten it back out for you and give you the space you're desired. You can also heat this piece back up, and you can come in here, say you need to put a little more squeeze on this scroll. You can come in and just give that a squeeze and actually compress that in a little bit, which we may do because I think I like to see a little bit more negative space in here. But I'm going to try to create that with this leg of the piece first. So this leg of the piece, I'm going to try to create a little more negative space in it since it just kind of bent in. It kind of bent in where I didn't want it to close in so much. And I want to kind of come more rounded into this piece here. So I'm going to get that hot one more time and do that. It doesn't take long to get heats like this. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through this process right now while we're at it. Because taking a heat on this small stock is just very, very rapid. As you can see, it's already there. I'm going to use the scrolling tongs, hopefully, to give myself a bit more bend. Then I'm going to try to get a little more curve in this piece here, just like so. That's looking pretty good. Yeah, I think I could be pretty well happy with that. Again, this is just the catch portion, so you make it as decorative or as fancy or play around with this stuff as much as you like until you have it, you know, as pretty as you want. This is just this little simple finial detail that when you look at it standing upright at you there, I think it's going to look pretty neat. It's going to go up in this orientation here. So I think it's going to look really nice. So before we go be too much more finicky with this portion, now we need to take and go ahead and get a bend in here. Now I'm going to come up, so I'm going to try to keep this catch portion fairly short. I want to keep it within the same confounds, if you will, as the piece, so no more than 2 inches tall to the outside bend, if I can, because my piece is only 2 inch wide, the backer plate is. So I don't really want it to stick up much beyond that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to heat this up. I will heat this finial up, and we will try to put another bend, like a little right angle bend somewhere in here-ish. And the best way to do that is at the vise. So we will be at the vise next. We'll grip the finial in the vise, and we'll give it a bend, and we'll upset that little piece there. All right, we got this piece nice and hot. We're going to lock it in the vise, and we're going to bend it away from the front of our finial. So because this finial is so close, where we want to keep everything nice and tight, we're going to lock it up here. We're going to look, hopefully get it as square to that anvil, as square to the vise jaws as we can. And then we're going to bend it over, and we're going to drive this bar home at an angle. This also consequently is going to help us form up that outside corner that we've been keeping as a theme for all of our pieces. You see it's been bent pretty tight right there. Now on this particular piece, there will most likely be a call for some dress up work, maybe with some filing, just to clean it up nicely, because it is very hard on a piece like this to get everything perfect. Sometimes you're better just to hit it up with a quick little grind, just to get things smoothed up, and then just go reheat, black it in the forge, versus spend a ton of time trying to get every little hammer mark just planished out with the hammer. Sometimes you can overwork the material, and that's a bad thing. There you go. So we got it nice and hot there. We did what we needed to do with that, and all that's left is for me to repeat the process of forming that outside corner and then cut it off. And now we are ready for the assembly stage and start placing all of our pieces. Okay, everyone, here we are in the other side of the shop. As you can see, I've already started on some of this process. It's a lot of wash, rinse, and repeat, so I'm only going to do one cut tenon for you guys, so this way you can see the process of doing that. But I have already done the tenons on the staple piece, and so the piece I'm going to be working on is the actual catch for this little gate latch here. And I'm also going to go over some of the layout and how I've decided to do what I'm doing here. So these pieces were 1/4 inch thick or 6 mil thick, and I decided that I wanted to make a nice 1/4 inch tenon on this to go through a 1/4 inch hole. Now, if you'll take a look at the back plate, I've already done some drilling work and some layout work, if you will, on the back plate. I think you guys can kind of understand these two here are going to go into the staple holes here. How did I figure out where to put those staple holes? Well, the first thing you need to do is go back to what we said at the beginning of the video. We need to make part B fit part A. So part B was the latch. So I went ahead and center punch marked and drilled a hole right at the pivot point. And then I laid this on there and figured about where I wanted that to sit according to my other pieces that I had in play, the staple and the catch itself. And so I figured out that I wanted to sit roughly about here. So I went ahead and drilled a hole in the back piece. And then I used this bolt. I used a bolt, little 1/4 inch bolt with nut there to hold the whole thing together temporarily. This allows me to get the action that I'm after in this piece. So I can actually feel, I can feel the action, see how smooth it's moving, and really check where this thing's going to be. So that allowed me then to take and place the staple on here. If you can see the slight outline of a little grease pencil where I traced around where that staple is actually going to sit. I traced the body of the staple on both sides, and that's what indicated where I needed to center punch mark and drill my holes for that portion. As you can see, it has a good bit of movement in there, so it should be able to slide in that slot just fine. And then once that was done and that was placed and I knew that's where I wanted to go with it, then I was able to take and place the catch piece, doing the same thing, tracing the outline of the catch piece and squaring it up to the actual back plate, and that gave me my hole where I was going to put that, center punch and drill. So that's kind of how, a very quick description of how you lay these things out. So you start with the back plate piece first, then you move on to the latch portion, so you figure out where you want that to sit, you anchor it, you make your staple fit that, and then you make your catch fit the rest of everything for the operation to actually work. So we're really honing in on this very quickly now. Again, we still have the piece connected at this stage, but now that all the layout's done, technically we can go ahead and split this, and we will probably split this before we start attaching things like the catch and the staple, because now that we have figured out where those things are going to go in relationship to this, that will be one thing that we will do before we start locking things down. Now, it may be helpful for you to do that. Go to your door or whatever you're making there for your gate, and you might want to make sure that where this is sitting is going to work out for how you plan before you start drilling holes and all that and cutting this off, cutting these in two, parting them in two. But right now this is going to work out just fine for what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and now show you how to take and cut a tenon. Now if you notice that this is a round hole and we have a square tenon here. So I'm going to show you how to very quickly, with nothing but a hacksaw and a file, create a nice cut tenon. So this is the hacksaw that I'm going to be using. This is just a hand hacksaw that we had forged a while back in some videos and I think some live streams there, all made by hand except for the hacksaw blade itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up on our line. So if you see the lines there, I've got a bit of the line work already lined out for that. How I came up with this is I made myself a sample piece. Remember that parent bar stock we had earlier? I made myself up a sample piece to get the right depth I was looking at after and the right thickness of the tenon pre-formed, and then I just bring that up on the piece and I just laid it out and then I scribed around it to get a transfer. And that way I could transfer that to all the pieces in the puzzle. It gives me some place to go with it. So now I'm going to go ahead and use this. I'm going to go ahead and saw cut this down if I can. We'll see. I've laid out some marks on the back here so I can see where I'm going. On the side. So pretty much just going to saw a little chunk or a little cube of material out of this. Now if you're not 100% sure with where you want to be on this, leave your tenon a little thicker than what's necessary. That you can always file it down to where it's supposed to be. So you can always file and dress these shoulders up to exactly where they need to be. So go ahead and just file. So go ahead and cut a little proud of your line and leave a little extra that you can dress off with a file. There's one side of the cube gone. And this, I don't have much range, unfortunately, because of the other side of this, the way it's hitting, for camera angle sakes. I would change this to a different position, but again, I don't have much range to do that with the camera angle as it sits. So we just do what we can, make little short strokes until we get through. Coming from the side now. Important thing is let the saw do the work. Now you could do this with a bandsaw if you want to. If you got a vertical bandsaw and you want to get, you want to be super gentle with your fingers. Watch out for it, but you can easily do this with a bandsaw as well. With some sort of powered saw if you don't want to use a hacksaw. I like the hacksaw because I've got more control. So that's why I like the hacksaw for that. So there you go. That's cut. Nice and easy. Now we're going to use an 8-inch mill file. You don't really want to use a very coarse file for tenon work. You can take off too much material too quickly, so I don't find that to be very handy. I like using a mill file, and because you know, an 8-inch mill file is about the right perfect thing for this. It takes off enough material, so it's a fairly quick process, but it also leaves a pretty smooth finish, and it doesn't overdo it, so you don't get something that's super thinned out. So just like in forge work, where we make a square, we turn it to octagon, then we turn it to round, we're going to do the same thing with our file work. We're going to go to the corner here, and with putting more force laterally than vertically, we are going to push against our tenon, our square corner, and we're going to file off a nice big 45-degree flat on there. There we go. Then I'm going to go to the other side, the opposite of the side I just did, and I'm going to make that side match. So same amount of pressure as you did before. Remember, you pick up on the back drag stroke. Files only cut one direction. I put another nice big 45-degree flat there. And now I go the opposite way. And this is awkward to do with camera. This is not how I would choose to stand to do this. But it's the way we're going to have to do it, because otherwise you guys won't be able to see what's going on. Now once we've done that, go the opposite way. Again, you're looking for a tenon that is octagon in shape from the top down view. Once you have achieved that, you've removed enough material in that direction. You don't want to take the tendency of letting your file tilt like this. You want to keep it as vertical as possible while you're working on this piece. And again, and you want to get as close to having an octagon tenon as you can. That tells you that you got it at the right, that you got it at the correct thickness to go to round. So at this stage, it's always behoove of you to just double check and see how it actually fits into the back plate. So we're going to go where that's going to go, looking down through the hole, and we are real close. When I remove those little facets, this thing should slip right down on there. So now I'm going to remove the corners that were created and start by making this thing going right on around the corners and smoothing everything up until I end up with something that is round. I want a nice round looking tenon. Again, don't get too carried away with this, especially if you've got a really sharp file. You can go from a nice tight fitting tenon to a super sloppy one real quick if you're not careful. So now we're at this stage where we keep checking it. Just like that, down it goes. That's what we're after. Bada bing, bada boom. So that's what we're looking for. Sweet. Just went down in there. Good. All right. So now that part's done. So that portion is done. Unlock this piece here. So now I have the catch done. Hopefully you guys can see this nicely. So we have the catch done. We have the staple done. We have the latch done. So now it's a matter of putting all the pieces into place. And we'll check our function, and everything seems to be right. Looks good. Now for this particular project, you can see on this piece, there's a little bit of wonkiness to this staple. I could true all that up with a file, make everything perfectly smooth and shiny. But given the look of this latch and where it's going in my 100-year-old barn here to hold some doors together. I'm going to leave it with a more rustic look. If you want to take the time at this point to make it look really, really sharp and everything crisp, you could file in, this flat spot screams engrave me with something, right? There's a lot of things you can do to improve this look or take it to that next level. But for me, this is good enough. This is what I want. So now the only thing that's left to do is actually to attach all these elements down. But before we attach all these elements down and in place and all that good stuff, we are going to go ahead and saw cut this apart, and I will do that over at the bandsaw. We will part these pieces. I'll dress everything up, that saw cut edge with a little bit of a file chamfer, and then we'll be ready for the finish work up at the anvil out in the blacksmith shop. Okie doke, now after a lot of work, you've got a bunch of pieces and time to take and put it and finish all of this up. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to set some of this stuff off the side. And just like I've been saying all along, we're going to fit part A with part B. That's going to be our first stop. So you can see I've got that through there. This is just a 1/4 inch rivet, kind of like a factory rivet. I want to pin that on. You don't have to murder this on or anything. You just want it to be on there so it's not coming loose. There we have it. That's on there. Now I'm going to put my staple on here. Make sure I've got it the right way that I had it originally intended to be, which that should be about right. So I'm going to tap one end in tight, tap the other end tight. Looks like everything should be good. Looking pretty good. So again, I'm going to pin that up nice. That's where this little hammer comes in to help quite a bit. Now that staple is swelled in that hole, it's going nowhere anytime soon. So you'll feel how tight this is. That's okay. We're going to heat this up to put a finish on it. And all this is going to get worked back and forth till it all works in nice harmony and unison all together. So the important thing is just get it to where everything fits nicely and snugly, and your pins are exactly where they need to be, and everything's riveted up nice. That's your main objective at this point. So everything's on there nice. Good. That portion's done, and we'll work that joint while it's hot, just like with a pair of tongs, and that'll smooth up our action and make everything nice. We'll go to our other half. We'll put that piece on there. We'll go ahead and work on pinning that up nice and tight. There we go, nice and snug. Shaboom. That should work out really good for my door setup. When it's together, like if you thought that this was fully closed, if you had a door that didn't have a gap like mine did, this bracket would be back a little further. This length here would be a little shorter. And so this way when it came together, it would latch right here. That's where you'd want it to latch at. But because of me working with the door gap that I've got in the barn door, my little whale tail back plate's going to be like that, and it's going to anchor so much better that way. So now that that's done, the only thing that's left to do is we heat these parts up and we get this to function together. And then I will drill. I have to look at my door. I'm not going to take you through all that because it's just a bunch of, that'll be site specific for you, but I'll find out where I want to put my mounting holes for my screws. I'll drill that and then attach it to the door. For finishes, we'll talk about finishes here. We're going to use, in this case, we're just going to use a wax finish to wax this up and make it look nice with a little with a traditional blacksmith wax finish. So let's get this hot and we'll work this back and forth so this thing functions super smoothly and we're good to go. All right, got that nice and warmed up. And now we're just going to work this back and forth in this joint. And that's going to give us a result. Well, that's nice and loose. And hopefully it'll stay nice and loose as we work back and forth. I'm going to have to use this. There we go. So just as it cools, you just keep it working back and forth. This makes a nice little wear fitting area, nice little wear joint. Should work out really nice there. And it should be nice and loose. Loosey-goose is what you're wanting. Get it brushed up nicely. And like I said, just keep tapping it back and forth as it cools, just like you would do a tong. Just like you would do some sort of tong blank. If you're putting a pair of tongs together, you do the same thing. We're just using that to work the joint back and forth to make sure everything's nice and loosened up. And it's a way of creating a really nice tight fitting joint without a whole lot of slop in it, which was my aim here. And now it should work fine. Should work marvelously. Easy up and down. That's what we're looking for. So now it works back and forth like I'm wanting. I can be happy with that. I warmed up the other piece too to get it to the same coloring, just so any of the white, any of the bright metal, it'll be, you know, taken away. It'll be dulling down, so we're all the same color, and it looks like it's one commonly forged piece. It gets rid of that shiny spot where I've dressed the edges, so no one part of this is distracting and drawing the eye any more than any other part of it, and we're good to go. So this latch is indeed functional at this point, but we got to get it on the door. So I will have to go drill all the little holes, get it ready, get mounted, and then go ahead and do my final finishing and then mount it up. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for watching this video. For those of you who have stuck around this long, I hope you've enjoyed this little detailed examination into making a simple latch. I know we made it a little bit fancier than just a super basic flat latch, but heck, if you're going to do it, you might as well make it look sharp, right? It might as well look good while doing it. So that's my thoughts of it anyhow. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if that's something you're into. And thank you all so much for watching. And thank you all the channel members that make content like this possible. God bless each and every last one of you, and we will catch you on the next one.